Well, it's 12 o'clock, and I would like to welcome everyone to our second brown bag lunch meeting. Really appreciate everyone that's tuned in and committing to be a part of this. I hope you find today's meeting informative and you take something from it. This is only our second brown bag meeting, so if you haven't attended one of these, we're really glad that you're here. We'll allow folks to type in questions, and we'll do our very best to answer all of the questions that we get at the end of the meeting. We're typically going to do these on the second Thursday after every board meeting. I appreciate those of you that allowed us the flexibility to cancel last Thursday. Unfortunately, we got to attend the funeral of a longtime BRA employee, our past general manager, Phil Ford. For those of you that didn't know Phil Ford, or General Ford, as some refer to him, Phil was here from 2001 to 2018, and he really changed the direction of the BRA and really put us on a path to be more customer friendly and really reorganized us to put us in a position to be successful with some very large projects that we accomplished under his leadership, and he will certainly be missed. After or before coming to the BRA, General Ford was a lieutenant general in the United States Air Force and had just a tremendously decorated career serving our country before he came to the Brazos River Authority to serve our state. So we will certainly miss our friend Phil Ford. Today for an agenda, we have a lot to talk about. Tiffany Malzahn, our environmental and compliance manager, is going to walk you through, just kind of give you a broad scale overview of environmental services and the things that her department does on a monthly basis to make sure that we're doing all that we can to protect the water quality within the Brazos Basin and within the rivers and in our reservoirs. And then Aaron Abel, our water services manager, is going to talk with you a little bit about what a crazy month this has been with all of the rainfall and the releases that we have and the current reservoir status. So we'll do that. We'll take questions. As I mentioned at the last brown bag, we're going to be really sensitive to your time. So we're going to try to hold to a 12 noon to 1 o'clock schedule. If we don't get around to your question today and you want to go to brazosriverauthority.org and submit your question to us, we'll certainly get back to you or give you a phone call. To start, what I'd like to do is walk you through just a little bit of our board agenda that we just completed with our May meeting. Our board meets every 2 months now, and we had a lot of business to take care of in May. I'm not going to walk you through the entire agenda and everything that we did. You can go to brazos.org and you can actually watch the board meeting and you can go through and select what agenda item you want to watch to save your time. But I just wanted to walk you through a few of the action items that our board considered. Really, there were a couple of things that we focused on. One was the general well-being of Possum Kingdom Reservoir. That reservoir is our oldest of reservoirs, approaching 100 years old within the next few, I guess, 10 or 15 years. So what we're trying to do is completely understand the condition of that reservoir and put forth a risk-based program to make sure that we get another 100 years out of that reservoir. So what we're doing is just a tremendous amount of assessments of the quality of the concrete, really digging in to try to understand how that dam is performing and how it's maintained itself over the last numerous years. And really what comes out of that is a program that allows us to improve the concrete and take care of that asset. The benefit will be it will allow us to maintain the dam. Another benefit will be that it will allow us to really look forward in the future and understand the projects that we need to complete, what those projects will cost, so we can begin to roll those type projects again through a risk-based asset management program to help our customers understand what the long-term costs are going to be to maintain our infrastructure. So our board took action on phase 3 of what we call the Castle project to continue the life of the Possum Kingdom Dam. We also, the board also approved some money for a pier plate wall assessment. The pier plate walls are associated with the gates up at Possum Kingdom, and that allows our maintenance staff, our maintenance crew, to continue to take those pier plate walls off the side of where the gates are and reconstruct those. And by doing those projects ourselves, we save our customers a lot of money, and it allows us to move forward with some of those. Think about them as kind of a home maintenance project in a timely fashion to make sure that all of our gates are operational. So we were really pleased to get those two board agenda items approved and moving forward. Another significant project that our board approved was the Lake Limestone fiber optic upgrade. Now, Lake Limestone is a really rural reservoir, and getting good internet and communication abilities out in the middle of the country can be challenging. So we got approval from our board to spend some money with AT&T to lay some fiber optic, and that will really improve how we communicate back and forth, and it'll help us to be more efficient with our operations. And then last but not least, and I tell you this because if you have questions about what a water master is, I would invite you to our board meeting video to go back and watch. Molly Moeller with the Texas TCEQ Water Master Program presented to our board about the Water Master. And basically the Water Master, if you want to think about it this way, is kind of like the water police. They make sure that people that have water permits are using the right amount of water when the water is available for them to be used, that people are reporting their water usage. So it was good to have Molly at our board meeting and help educate staff and board on the Water Master Program. So that's kind of high level overview of our board meeting. Again, you can go to brazos.org and watch that if you'd like. And at this time, I'm going to turn the program over to Tiffany Malzahn, our Environmental Compliance Program Manager. Tiffany?
Hi, thank you. I was just going to give a brief overview. Start with Brazos River Authority's mission statement. It says we exist to develop, manage, and protect the water resources of the Brazos River Basin. And I'm going to discuss how environmental services supports that mission today. And for those who are familiar with our strategic plan or watched last time, the work we'll be discussing falls in under Section 3, where it says the BRA will protect water resources and where possible improve water quality and habitat to support responsible and efficient use of the basin's resources. One of the major programs that we participate in is the Texas Clean Rivers Program, and that is the overwide state water quality monitoring program. We are the major monitors in the Brazos Basin. There's some others, which I'll show you in a minute, that participate. But the overall objectives are to basically provide good insight into the status of water quality of the basins and how to improve in areas where improvement is needed. As part of that Clean Rivers program, I mentioned there are other entities that perform water quality monitoring activities in the basin. So we host an annual meeting to make sure we're not duplicating efforts. And that really maximizes the coverage that the basin receives for sampling and analysis. And on the right are just some of the groups that typically participate and do some monitoring in the basin also. Here is the FY 2021, our current monitoring stations for the entirety of the Brazos. The red sites are BRA, blue is the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, and then the greens represent several universities, and the fish symbols identify some biological monitoring, which is just general assessment and status of the biology, which can be a good long-term indicator of the water quality of a water body. For the next few slides, a few terminology items that you may not be familiar with. As part of compliance with the Federal Clean Water Act, TCEQ has designated what they call classified segments. Those are the divisions of the major river basins, usually the larger rivers, so the Brazos, the Navasota, the Little River, and the major reservoirs. For those classified segments, they assign a designated use, and those are typically aquatic life use, recreation, general, public drinking water, the four main ones in the Brazos. And those are the uses that all water quality data gets judged by. Can we support a healthy aquatic environment? Can the water be used for drinking water, etc.? Anything that is not a classified segment is called an unclassified segment. It does not have site-specific numeric water quality standards developed for it, and they are usually assessed against the classified segment into which they flow. Water quality standards then are hard criteria set for chloride, sulfate, TDS, DO, pH water temperature, and bacteria levels. And those are hard numeric standards that we get assessed for. And when you assess against water quality standards, if a water body is not compliant with those standards, then it is called an impaired water body. TCEQ has also identified screening levels, which are mainly for your nutrients, so chlorophyll, nitrogen, phosphorus, to protect from excessive aquatic growth and vegetation. Those are a little more difficult to make a hard standard on, so the screening levels get assessed, and then if something is not compliant with those screening levels, the water body is considered a concern. So my next slides just give you a current update on where we are in the basin for the status of water quality. Water quality does get assessed annually by BRA, and then TCEQ does a biannual assessment. So every 2 years they put out a new, what they call Texas Integrated Report on Water Quality. In our basin overall, the designated uses and the classified segments are obtained. We do have in the main stem of the Brazos River one big variable, which is natural chloride deposits. These two pictures on the right, you may think that's a pretty snowy picture from this February, but that's actually salt crested on the ground in the upper basin where we have brine springs and salt flats. We do have throughout the basin, mainly on unclassified streams, we do have some impairments and concerns for dissolved oxygen, bacteria, nutrients, and dissolved solids. This is just for those of you unfamiliar with the upper basin, a map of where the major brine springs are and the known major salt flats. Those occur because we are at the bottom of a massive underground salt dome that goes all the way up through Kansas and Colorado, and we're just at the very bottom of that in the outcropping. So those springs out in West Texas, this is just southeast of Lubbock. That's where it all bubbles out of the ground. Red River Authority and the Red River Basin has some similar brine springs also. So here from the most recent Texas Integrated Report on Water Quality are the list of impairments. You can see we do have quite a few bacteria impairments, and most of those are on these smaller prairie streams that are unclassified water bodies, but they're assessed against a full contact recreation standard. That's something TCEQ has been working on for years to go back and set some site-specific standards, because a lot of those small prairie streams cannot meet the same level of bacteria for contact recreation that the major water bodies do. They just don't have enough flow, and the smallest amount of bacteria input can turn them because of the low volume of water. But overall, you'll see we have very few impairments throughout. We do have a few water bodies, Somerville and Limestone, that are impaired for pH, and that's something that we're watching very closely. That is most often an algae related issue. And then for our concerns, you see the concerns for nutrients are pretty high across the basin, and unlike the impairments, they do impact a lot of the larger classified segments. So that is something that is a concern, and the more we grow and populate and urbanize, I suspect those concerns will only increase. However, while that sounds, also not so great overall, if you look from 2010 to 2020, we are showing good improvement across the basin. We've seen a reduction in the number of bacteria impairments, DO, pH chloride. Everything has been going down. The only ones that are left are toxicity and sediment. That's too small lakes that were built back in the 30s to serve industry, and they were much abused back before we had a Clean Water Act, and that's just going to take some time for nature to clean those up. And you'll see a similar trend with our concerns. We are, even though that map looked very negative, we are showing signs of improvement and reduced nutrient levels. The only one that's gone up is bacteria, and this number is a result of TCEQ re-rating some of those smaller streams. So they may still be some high bacteria streams, but they're no longer held to a full contact recreation standard. So they've come off the impairment list, but are still on the concern list. If you are ever interested in any of the water quality data collected by the Brazos River Authority, we do have 2 ways to search for that data on brazos.org. One is a map-based site where you can scroll to the site you're interested in, click on it, and then it will take you to an area where you can select the parameters you're interested in. If it is a site that we don't monitor, it will direct you to the TCEQ's website where you can access their data. Or we have a query-based by watershed or classified segment data search if you're not comfortable moving around the maps. Just to give an idea of the different types of monitoring that we do in addition to water quality, we do biological, physical habitat, and riparian monitoring and sampling throughout the basin. We routinely conduct sampling events to support the development of a baseline data set to inform the environmental flow standards throughout the basin, working on Allen's Creek fishery assemblage. We do routine monitoring of some areas that have sensitive aquatic species, and then just general aquatic life monitoring for identification of changes in the overall composition and the status of those different species to see if there's, any indication of long-term water quality concerns that maybe aren't being picked up in our monitoring. And then as needed, we will also conduct monitoring to help with Texas pollutant discharge elimination system permits. Those are basically wastewater permits. We'll assist Parks and Wildlife with fish kill investigations, and we'll perform a series of analyses for TCEQ to help them refine their water quality standards. The overall types of things we typically sample for: fish, macroinvertebrates, which are aquatic insects, freshwater mussels, algae, aquatic plants, and we'll identify riparian vegetation, so the trees and brush on the stream banks. We also participate in monitoring for nuisance and invasive species, and we do a lot of physical habitat assessment, which is, surveying the channel and seeing how the channel changes with high flow events, monitoring the sediment in the basin, and seeing how, right now we're going through some major high flow events. So we'll go back out this summer and pull samples and see how at different sites those high flow events changed or flushed that stretch of the river out. For FY 2021, we have several biological sites planned. Of course, the recent rains we anticipated of getting started in April, and so far we have yet to be able to get out on any of these sites because of significant flood waters. So we hope that by July things will have stabilized somewhat and we can actually get out there and start collecting data. So due to the weather and current flows, we may not be able to hit all those sites this year. One emerging concern throughout the basin is that over the last 10 years, we've seen a rapid increase in the number of threatened and endangered species that are federally protected in the basin. The Endangered Species Act is the nation's strongest conservation law, and across the nation it has affected state-based water rights, has restricted and modified new water supply projects. And, you can be, if your project in any way is deemed to harm a protected species, there are criminal and civil penalties that can be incurred. So that's something we watch very closely. The most recent U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service 5-year work plans contains 42 species known to occur in Texas. So the state of Texas is getting a lot of attention from the federal government right now as far as species diversity. One thing we have recently been working on is there are 3 freshwater mussels in the basin that were up for consideration for federal protection. One, through additional monitoring and analysis, Fish and Wildlife Services decided not to pursue anymore, but 2 of them are still being evaluated for federal protection. So we wanted to be proactive and help conserve those species in our basin. So we went forward with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and since 2018 have been negotiating what they call a candidate conservation agreement with assurances. This is a voluntary agreement whereby the BRA commits to perform certain conservation activities for the benefit of the species. We submitted it for formal consideration in August of 2020. It was published for public comment in October 2020. We've spent the last 6 months responding to those comments, editing the agreement as appropriate, and we anticipate full execution by the end of June. And then we will start moving to implement the activities and methods in those reports. Just give you an idea of some of the future species that we are watching very closely right now. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is evaluating the alligator snapping turtle and the Texas salamander. They've also commissioned studies on the western chicken turtle and the Navasota false foxglove. The 2 butterflies and some other freshwater mussels are in their 5-year work plan. And then the state of Texas Parks and Wildlife also develops a state threatened and endangered list, and on that list is the Brazos water snake. And we are commencing this summer a large research project into that. That's one where we think we have the potential with better data to also implement some good conservation activities, protect that species, and hopefully it never gets elevated to the level of federal concern. Invasive species, I'm sure you've all heard about the zebra mussel invasion into Texas. Those are also a big concern. They can negatively affect water quality. They also can impact those native species that are sensitive or very specialized. So we do a lot of monitoring for invasive species. We frequently document presence, absence of zebra mussels, salt cedar, aquatic plants, and feral hog damage that we observe along the rivers. We are actively cooperating with Parks and Wildlife in early detection zebra mussel monitoring program. We were, up until last year, monitoring Lake Ranger, and then once Lake Ranger became fully infested with zebra mussels, we've now worked with Parks and Wildlife, and we're doing some early detection monitoring on Lake Limestone. They're working on Possum Kingdom, Granbury, and Whitney, doing the similar activities. We've also been cooperating with them with salt cedar treatment on Brazos River Authority property in the Upper Basin, upstream of Possum Kingdom Reservoir. And we've been partnering with them to treat water hyacinth, which is an invasive aquatic plant that has popped up on Lake Limestone in the past year. So overall, at the end of the day, our top 5 concerns going forward related to water quality is the continued increase in urbanization and population growth. That's just going to shift the things we need to look for. It's very different. We've historically been an ag-based basin, and as we transfer to a more urban land use, we're going to need to adjust our water quality monitoring, and we're likely going to see some changes as more areas get developed. Increased eutrophication, that goes hand in hand with increased urbanization. You get more impervious cover, less filtration of nutrients during rain events, and more nutrients entering our water body. So increased issues with aquatic plant growth and algae are likely in our future. Historically, we have seen quite a bit of destruction of riparian communities, which is the streamside native vegetation. As we continue to develop, that is a big concern. Hopefully, future development will be done with a little bit greater environmental focus than in the past, and we can stem the degradation of those communities. Why that's really important is once you remove the native vegetation, you really remove the natural protection that we have from erosion. So when we get these high flow events in the areas where the riparian zone's been gone, you can see the impacts. When in our channel survey data shows huge shifts in the shape of the channel after every big flood event after from the time before, you'll see the channel shift quite a bit. Overall, just an increased frequency of disturbance, and then of course invasive species continue to come in from other parts of the world. We have no natural controls for them, so they can be quite destructive when they're there. And that is the end of my review of environmental services, and I'll look forward to answering any questions after the other presentations are done. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany, very much. I appreciate that. We are just so fortunate at the Brazos River Authority to have Tiffany leading us in so many of our environmental endeavors, and she is also equally as blessed to have a staff of chemists and environmental scientists that just do a really an outstanding job. Next up is Mr. Aaron Abel, and Aaron is our Water Services Manager, and he's going to walk you through what's going on with our reservoir levels and high flows and talk about our water supply a little bit. Aaron? Aaron, you're muted, my friend.
Okay, I was talking away, so I'm hopefully everybody can see my slides, and I'll go ahead and get started.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, like David said, I just wanted to give everyone an update on the water supply system. It's been a big change since the last brown bag that we had in early April. I think we were talking about an intensifying drought, and we were concerned about lower lake levels and well below
Aaron,
average.
Can I interrupt you for a minute?
Sure.
Can you go in and show your slideshow as a slideshow, because we're seeing talking notes and a bunch of stuff.
Okay, hold on a second.
Sure. Much better. Thank you, sir.
Much better. Okay. Sorry about that. So, as over the last month, we've seen some very heavy rainfall events. In late April, there was a significant pattern change, and that ushered in a stream of heavy rainfall events that continued nearly nonstop over the last month, and we're dealing with that today as of this morning. And the benefit, though, is we did see some significant drastic improvements in the water supply status with here recently, and increases obviously from our releases from our BRA water supply reservoirs that include Possum Kingdom Reservoir, Lake Granbury, and Lake Limestone. And then the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, they're impounding floodwaters in the multi-purpose flood control reservoir system within the Brazos Basin. So we'll kind of go through these slides and give you an update on what's going on. Let's see. So this as a graphic that we typically show or we update on a weekly basis every Wednesday, and this is as of June 8th this morning, and the height of the reservoirs, or the bars, is representative of the conservation storage or the storage of the reservoirs themselves. And as you'll see, there's not very many parts of these reservoirs that have empty storage. This morning, Lake Granbury, we are operating Lake Granbury below the full elevation because we're releasing about 32,000 cubic feet per second through De Cordova Bend Dam. We had 3 gates open at Possum Kingdom overnight last night, and we were able to close 1 gate this morning. So from a BRA standpoint, it's safe to operate these reservoirs, below full when there's high flows, and that's what we've had to deal with here recently. I will point out that in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see the lakes and the associated percent full and the drawdown. Lake Georgetown, although it is represented in Stage 1 Drought Watch in this graphic, we are in the process of rescinding the drought watch status of Lake Georgetown. The last week, we were able to turn off the pump station, the Williamson County Regional Raw Water Line that transfers water from Stillhouse Hollow to Georgetown. That we supplement this water supply at Lake Georgetown with Stillhouse Hollow water that is transferred through the pipeline. And the lake level at Georgetown rose above our operational off trigger for the pump station. So hopefully later this week and early next week, we'll be able to officially rescind the Stage 1 drought status at Georgetown. Over on the Navasota River, Lake Limestone, we are releasing about 7,500 cubic feet per second through that reservoir. It's about 0.4 feet above the top of conservation, and we've been receiving some rainfall, heavy rainfall over the last several weeks, and we'll potentially have to increase a little bit more later today. Now, you will see that the core reservoirs are above 100%, and that represents storage in the flood pools. And we'll talk a little bit more about that a little later on in the presentation. But there's a lot of storage that is above the conservation pool and is managed by the Corps of Engineers. So the Corps of Engineers manages the 8 other reservoirs in the Brazos River Basin. That's Lake Whitney, Proctor, Aquila, Belton, Stillhouse Hollow, Georgetown, Granger, and Lake Somerville. And they are in charge of managing and slowly releasing the water from the reservoirs during flood times. We do obviously have water rights and water contract or storage contracts with the Corps of Engineers to use that water to supply customers throughout the basin. And during dry times, we do make requests to the Corps of Engineers for releases downstream. But during flood times, that is the Corps of Engineers' responsibility.
Aaron, before you move on to the next slide, I want to go back and reiterate something, please. The Lake Granbury being below conservation, the negative 0.09, the drawdown of that reservoir is because we're proactively managing the water supply because we know what the releases are from the upstream reservoir of Possum Kingdom, and we know how much water is already in the river headed our way. So that is a more efficient way of trying to make sure that we have minimal amount of impacts both to the river and to the reservoir. These drawdowns aren't based on forecasts. They're based on water that's actually in the river or being released from another reservoir.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, and at the conclusion of this wet period, PK, Granbury, and Limestone will all be full. I mean, all the reservoirs will be full, so that at the conclusion of this event, it will be full. All the reservoirs will be full. The 60-day observed rainfall, we wanted to show what happens over the last 2 months since our last brown bag, and we've seen a lot of rainfall. Basically from just southeast of Lubbock all the way down to the Gulf Coast, we've seen widespread 10 to 20 inches of rain, and most of that fell starting late April and then through the month of May, and that continues today. We are supposed to get into a drier pattern starting tomorrow, so we'll see what happens beyond that. But May and June are 2 of our wettest months in Texas and in the Brazos Basin. So there were some areas around between Possum Kingdom and Lake Granbury that had on the order of 20 to 25 inches of rain over the last 2 months. And then also downstream in the lower parts of the basin, from about Hempstead down to the coast, had some 20 to 25 inches, and some areas even above 25 inches. So a lot of rainfall, and like I said, most of that fell in in mostly the month of May. So there are some areas, I guess, lower amounts of rain that you'll see on the northern part of Bell County and McLennan County, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But but most of the basin saw significant rain and improvements in the drought conditions. We wanted to show the departure from normal rainfall dating back to January 1st, and this kind of gives you an idea of how much more rain above normal fell from January 1st through June 7th. And again, most of that rain, we had some significant rainfall deficits going into April and the latter part of April. And so again, most of this fell in the last couple months or last month or so. So we had widespread 8 to 12, up to 12 inches of above normal rainfall from the Granbury area up to Possum Kingdom, and some areas even upstream of Possum Kingdom that had above normal rainfall. And then the Central Basin, oddly enough, we're still about normal. We had some significant rainfall deficits, and that's kind of interesting that we had so much in the deficit, but we've got so much rain, and now we're kind of back to normal in some of those areas. And even, like I said, in the Bell County and northern Bell County and McLennan County areas, and then over even down around Stillhouse Hollow are slightly below normal. But then down in the lower basin, we've seen upwards of 12 to 16 inches above normal, or even more in parts of the lower part of the basin. So a lot of rain and above normal conditions from the last months of rain. We wanted to show a snapshot of the improvement of the drought monitor. The drought monitor is released on a weekly basis, and we update and overlay our reservoir status on this every Thursday. And so what you see here on the left side of the graphic or of this slide is the April 8th drought monitor with our reservoir capacity. And you can see pretty widespread severe to moderate drought conditions, and even exceptional drought conditions in the far upper part of the basin. But 100% of the basin was either in abnormally dry or more severe drought conditions 60 days ago. And then fast forward to, this is last week, so this is June 3rd, last Thursday. We see our reservoirs that are full or very, very close to full, and then also significant improvements and more or less most of the basin in completely drought-free conditions, except the far upper part of the basin. I will say that there have been some significant rain events in the upper part of the basin that will, I think next week we'll see some additional improvements in the drought monitor in that part of the basin around the Lubbock area. I did mention the flood control component of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers reservoirs. Those are multi-purpose reservoirs that, in combination of protecting or mitigating flooding and impounding floodwaters, they also we store water, and the Corps stores water for water supply. For each of the reservoirs, there's 4 components, or potentially 4 components. One is the flood pool capacity. So that's how much water could actually be stored at each of the core reservoirs. So Proctor, Whitney, Belton, Stillhouse, Georgetown, Granger, and Somerville, that light blue is the actual capacity of what could be stored in the flood pools at those reservoirs. And typically in flood control reservoirs in the Brazos, they can store between 3 and 5 times the amount of volume that is stored in the conservation pool. So vast amounts of water can be stored, and that mitigates downstream flooding. And basically what happens is when we release water from Possum Kingdom and Granbury, that flows downstream and fills into Lake Whitney. And the Corps of Engineers looks downstream at at control points along the river, and they make decisions on how they can safely release that water downstream to prevent flooding. And so as we move away from this rainy time, you'll see the Corps of Engineers making decisions on safely evacuating the flood storage slowly. And this is going to take weeks it's really going to take a month or even more than a month to evacuate the flood control storage of these reservoirs. The crosshatched portion of the flood control reservoirs, that's the flood pool storage. And so that's what's actually being stored as far as impounding flood waters in these reservoirs. And you'll see the table in the upper right. It'll have the flood pool percent full and then the drawdown. And so Lake Whitney right now, this morning, it's 23. The flood pool is 23% full. So there's a vast amount of water that can be stored in Whitney, and they'll continue to impound our releases from Lake Granbury and Possum Kingdom as we release them. And most of the other reservoirs in the Brazos system are around 20%, 12 to 20% full. Lake Somerville is 26% full. So they make decisions on prioritizing the evacuation of the flood pool while being sensitive and making sure that downstream flooding is prevented. This next slide, we wanted to provide some release volumes of what we've released at our three reservoirs, Possum Kingdom, Granbury, and Limestone in 2021, and how it compares to previous years. I know there's been a lot of talk of how does 2021, this May 2021, compare to previous years, and we coordinate closely with the River Forecast Center, the Corps of Engineers on our releases, and a lot of folks will say, well, this is kind of like May of 2015 and how the drought broke. You can see that it compares pretty closely. I mean, we didn't have very much release from our three reservoirs prior to about April, and so most of the volumes you'll see here, from Lake Limestone, Lake Granbury, and Possum Kingdom are from the last month, more or less. And so I think we released since January 1st, we've released about 262,000 acre feet from Lake Limestone. So each of these bars, there's three components, and the green is the Possum Kingdom component of release volume. The blue is the Lake Granbury release volume component, and then the gray is Lake Limestone. I think at Lake Granbury, thus far, this is through June 7th. We've released a total of I think around 760,000 acre feet of water through Lake Granbury, and then at Possum Kingdom we've released around I think 450 to 460,000 acre feet at Possum Kingdom. So we'll continue. We have continued inflows at Possum Kingdom. Both the Clear Fork out towards Abilene, and then the Seymour, the main stem through Seymour, and then Double Mountain Fork. There's water all the way up to Lubbock. So we'll be continuing to release water through from PK and through Granbury over the next several weeks, and those will be trending downward, assuming we don't have any more rainfall. So it has been it's been a wet May, and we'll continue to see some releases as we start to dry out, hopefully. We also wanted to provide the seasonal drought outlook. This is issued by the National Weather Service and NOAA every month, and I think we'll have another one, or the NOAA will have another one issued in later in June. But this was released in May 20th, and you'll see 4 categories here. The brown is the drought persists. The tan colors is the drought remains but improves, and then the green is drought removal likely, and then the yellow is drought development likely. Fortunately, there's no areas in the Brazos that we're going to see drought development, at least forecasted through the end of August through this product. We're going to see continued drought removal likely in parts of the upper basin, as I mentioned, and everybody's kind of focused on what's going on out west and the massive drought that is continuing in the western states. So here in Texas in the Brazos River Basin, we're doing well. We're going to have water flowing down the rivers and the tributaries well into July and into August. And so from a water supply perspective, we're well situated to enter the summer. And we are gonna have a summer in Texas. This is Texas, and we'll have some heat, but rest assured we'll have water available for everyone. And that's all I had for the water supply.
Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate all the information. I also appreciate you and your staff taking the time to put this together. I know that when we're in flood release operation mode, your folks are working around the clock, and I know you're tired. It's been a long couple of weeks. But while I've got you on the stand here, let me go ahead and start with a question that we've got for you, and that is just kind of explain a little bit about the decision-making process that went into that third gate opening at Possum Kingdom.
Yeah, sure. So I guess going into yesterday morning, we received some very heavy rainfall on top of an already swollen river upstream of Possum Kingdom. We were receiving 18 to 19,000 cubic feet per second of inflows prior to the rain event, and we had two gates open. The lake level was rising above our operational full elevation at Possum Kingdom is elevation 999. The top of the gates is elevation 1,000, and our emergency spillway elevation is at elevation 1,000. We were hopeful that we could maintain a two-gate release and not have to open a third gate, which increases the release rate to around 27,000 CFS. And we know that impacts portions of Parker County, and but inflows continue to rise. Since we got between 1.8 and 3 inches right on top of the reservoir, and the lake level continued to rise above to above 999.50. And if we had not have opened the third gate at Possum Kingdom, the lake level would have rose further and would have overtopped the gates and presented a dam safety issue. And so that's why we have to make the decision, on the tough decision, to open gates at Possum Kingdom, and particularly that third gate. So we don't take that lightly, and we look at stream flow, we look at the rainfall amounts, we coordinate very closely with the West Gulf River Forecast Center that issues the forecasts, and as David said, what we don't make decisions on forecasts. We make decisions on lake level rises and the calculated inflows into the reservoir. So what we do is we're taking a change in reservoir storage over time and calculating inflows. And if those inflows rise above 30 to 35,000 CFS, that triggers the need for that third gate as that lake level rises towards elevation 1,000. So,
Aaron, thank you. Sticking with you there, talk a little bit about how these releases will affect the gate openings, will impact the areas Richmond, Roche-Sharon, and downstream. Yeah.
Well, and I guess that goes back to how lucky, I guess, the Brazos River Basin is to have Lake Whitney. Lake Whitney is a huge component of the flood control decisions and infrastructure that allows folks to be safe downstream of the dams, and so our releases will our releases from Possum Kingdom, it'll reach Lake Granbury later tonight, and we'll have to continue to increase Lake Granbury, over the night tonight and into tomorrow, most likely, and that'll take a couple of days, a day and a half to reach Lake Whitney, and once it reaches Lake Whitney, that'll be the Corps is impounding flows, and they're slowly releasing flows downstream. But from forecasts that I've seen, for the Richmond Rocheron area, the forecast will stay below minor flood stage for Richmond. I think the Rocheron area may reach the what's called minor flood stage of 44 feet, and that's so that'll happen later, and it's falling actually, and so it is in minor right now, in minor flood stage at Rocheron, but it's currently it's projected to continue to fall. It's about 50. There's the flow rate at Rocheron is about 59,000 CFS, and it is projected to continue to fall to about 46,000. And at Richmond, it's going to continue to fall as well. It's below the minor flood stage of 45 feet. It's at 39.1 feet, and will continue to fall. And it may rise back up a little bit, but the Corps will be making releases. Watching the downstream gauges and making decisions on evacuating the flood control storage, while also making sure that there's no flooding downstream. Our releases from Lake Limestone flows down the Navasota, and it does reach the main stem, below the Navasota, and those are forecasted in the river forecast model. So the National Weather Service, the River Forecast Center, they are the experts, and they forecast the river. And so if anyone wants to know about what the river is doing in their location, please go to the West Gulf River Forecast Center, National Weather Service forecast office, and reach out, and you can, and I think we also we share that on social media, on Twitter and Facebook, on these updates for the forecast for the river points below the reservoirs.
Aaron, can you talk briefly, and then I'll let you go. Can you talk briefly about the call out list, call out notification, and how to get on that if people are if folks are interested?
Yeah, sure. So we have at each of our 3 reservoirs, we have what's called a downstream call list, and you can reach out and get on those call lists. I will warn you that you will get called potentially all hours of the day and night. But for each reservoir, we have specific intervals or criteria that trigger a call out. And so if you're on that list, you can either get a phone call, an email, a text, or all 3, detailing what is happening, the reservoir release rate, the timing of that release, and the potential impacts downstream of the reservoir. I believe we have, I don't know the exact URL, but we have on our Brazos.org website, we have an area where you can sign up for the downstream call list, and again, you will receive emails and potentially phone calls or texts all hours of the night. But it's important if you have, particularly if you have property downstream along the river, downstream of our reservoirs, and you want to be on that list, please get on that list. We have a robust call out system that will call out, and basically what happens is once we notify of a release change, that automatically gets entered into the call out system, and then gets transmitted through everybody on that list.
So a few more questions. One of the questions that we received is, when will the board meetings be in person again? And are they open to the public? And the answer to the second part of that is absolutely. They're always open to the public. And we will be back in our central office having in-person board meetings for our July 26th board meeting. Furthermore, that puts our next brown bag meeting, a virtual meeting, on August the 5th. So look forward to having that. We received a question about the D. Cordova Bend Dam Park, and I turn to our Upper Basin Manager, Mike McClendon, to answer that one. When will D. Cordova Bend Park be open again at Lake Granbury?
Yeah, we'd had hoped to get it open today, as a matter of fact, but weather considerations with all the rain, what we need to do is go in there and mow before people return. We've been working on the park roads, and so that aspect is complete, but we're trying to get in there and hopefully the rain subsides and we'll be able to get in there, mow, and then people can access. So it's kind of a day-to-day, but we hope to have it open by the end of the week for sure.
Thanks, Mike. Also, a question that we received, a two-part question. What is the BRA doing in response to the concerns of landowners along the Navasota River downstream flood concerns of Lake Limestone from the releases? Are you taking any action independent of bringing that to the flood planning group for consideration? And I would turn to Matt Phillips to address that one.
Hey, David, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so, one of the things that we, have wanted to do and are willing to do with regard to downstream landowner concerns on the Navasota River downstream of Lake Limestone is education. We have offered to and continue to be willing to meet with any landowner or group of landowners to help explain to them the operations of Lake Limestone and why it is not the cause, or why it does not make flooding worse downstream of the reservoir than it would be without the reservoir being there in the first place, and also why changes to his operations would not actually be solutions to flooding problems below the Navasota. Independent of that, we have chosen to push this issue through the regional flood planning process because that is the venue that was created by the legislature through the passage of Senate Bill 8 last session to study and look at localized flooding and develop mitigation solutions for localized flooding. So it is specifically designed to look at issues like flooding on the lower Navasota and determine where the flooding is coming from, how it's happening, what's causing it, what are things that could be done to mitigate that. And then the even bigger benefit is that solutions that are identified through the state and regional flood planning process can be eligible for state funding to pay in order to mitigate flooding in the future. So that's the reason that we've chosen to go that route, and we will continue to kind of champion that issue through the Lower Brazos Regional Flood Planning Group.
Thank you, Matt. In closing, I want to make sure that you have the right information here, because I said something incorrect a minute ago. If you have questions that you want answered from today's presentations, or other thoughts or questions that you have about the water business or the Brazos River Authority, please send those to information@brazos.org, information@brazos.org, and we'll do our absolute best to get to those. Again, we appreciate all of the folks that tuned in to listen, and we look forward to seeing you again in the brown bag back in August. So everybody have a great afternoon, and thank you so much.